Hello, happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. This is our weekly live stream series. We try to at least once a week host a live stream related to topics about digital transformation, the people, process, technology sides of transformation. And I'm excited for today's guest, who I'm going to introduce here in just a moment. But today's topic, or the thread we're going to cover today, is financial technology, or fintech, as well as financial transformation. So we're going to go very focused today on that fintech and financial transformation topic. But before we jump in and introduce our guest here today, I wanted to ask a couple things. One is, wherever you're joining from today, I'd love to hear where you're joining from. So if you don't mind just dropping in the chat where you're listening in from today, I'd love to hear or see where you're from, just so we understand who's with us here today on the live stream. Secondly, we encourage questions along the way. So any questions you have, please feel free to jump in at any point. I've got a list of questions I'm going to start with our guest Dan here, who I'll introduce here in a second, but I'd love to get your questions as well, especially if we're not covering something or you want more clarification on anything we don't get to. So encourage your questions from whatever live stream you're listening to today, which, by the way, we're live streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter today. So whichever live stream you're on, thanks for joining. Please feel free to drop in the chat, and we'll get to your questions. So just to get to the introduction here, though, like I said, today's topic is financial transformation in fintech, which is actually an area I know very little about. So I'm excited for today's conversation because I want to learn more about this stuff. And I wanted to invite a guest that I knew I could learn from and I knew could really educate us in a good way and share some good content with us on this topic. So with me today is Dan Maurice, who's a senior vice president at PNC Bank. And Dan, thanks for being here today.
Hey, you know what, Eric? My pleasure. Great to be here.
Great. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and maybe just a little bit about your background. If you don't mind, also share with us about PNC Bank. What is PNC Bank, and what do you do for PNC?
Yeah, so I am, as you said, a senior vice president. I'm in our Treasury management department. I lead our Treasury management and payments efforts in the western part of the United States for our corporate and middle market banking space. PNC is a full service U.S.-based bank where we offer a wide range of financial services. But like I said, my specific area where I focus is on the payment space and cash management or treasury management.
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool. So you and I know each other on a personal level. Our kids one of our sons go to the same high school here in Denver, Colorado, where we're both based. But you recently invited me to a little meeting or a lunch and learn sort of event that you were hosting at PNC, and you covered a lot of really cool topics related to trends in the fintech space, and just a lot of really cool stuff, which is actually part of what sparked this conversation, this live stream. And in that, you did talk about a lot of trends, or the group talked a lot about a lot of trends in the fintech space. So maybe just to summarize for the audience, what are some of the general trends that you're seeing in the fintech or financial technology space?
Yeah, so I would say, Eric, over the last several years, the financial services industry has evolved its offerings to meet the demands of customers' expectations and security needs. And, we're all very familiar with the coronavirus pandemic, and just the impact of that pandemic has really compounded the need for innovative, user-centric digital solutions. And this is, it's likely going to be an inflection point for the financial services industry. And this is both for consumers and for businesses. And, we, as I said, PNC operates in all, I shouldn't say all, but most areas of the financial services industry. And, we've, there's a lot of financial technology companies out there. And that's kind of where this conversation sparked from. And I will say, from a banking perspective, it's kind of been an evolution over time on how these financial technologies were viewed from the banking industry. And I'll just talk through that, that kind of evolution, because initially as they first started coming out, banks, we viewed these fintechs as competition. If you think about it, they would, they're very innovative, and they would focus on a single challenge that maybe a business or an individual was trying to solve for, and they would solve for that individual challenge. Their focus has always been on the user experience and creating simple user experiences. We all demand simple. In our personal lives, we're used to simple. We've all got our phones where you can, do just about anything with a couple of clicks. And those personal experiences, we have the same expectations in our business lives as well. And, as we talked about that competition, I mean, I'll tell you, banks, we tried to solve for everything. We would look at a situation, we'd try to build solutions that would solve for every customer need. But if you think about the range of consumers to, all the way up to multinational large corporates, there's a lot of different things to solve for. So, we tried to be everything for everyone. And so, like I said, it kind of started out as a competitive environment. What I will say is that evolution, it has really evolved into partnerships. And where, the financial technology companies, which I'm just going to call fintech for short, we talked about, they had great solutions that solved these individual problems. And, one of the things that they lacked was a distribution channel, because these are, generally speaking, smaller organizations, startups with great ideas, great solutions. So, we've got the fintech here with the great solutions. Then you've got, the banking side. We looked at it. Okay, so we've got the distribution channels. We've got the strict due diligence due to our regulated industry, which also gives us the credibility with all of those companies and individuals that we have, that we have access and connections with. And we realized that, while banks can't build for everything, there was a great benefit to partnering. We've got the fintech with the solution, we've got the bank with the distribution channel and the credibility. So then we started looking at how do we partner together to get these solutions out there. And then, taking it even one step further, we've got banks that are now implementing their own incubators for aspiring ideas and aspiring companies. And, what I can say, at PNC, we have an incubator we call Numo. And it's a place where we look at unsolved business problems and we look at ways to solve those problems with some of the emerging technologies that are out there. And I would say this, this overall evolution of customer behavior, it's really why we've been focused on making treasury management, let's call it less transactional and more transformational. So that's kind of the evolution of where things have been and the trends that we're seeing in, just in the space in general.
Sure. What about, so you talk about these very specific problems that these fintech startups are trying to solve, and how, they're not trying to be everything to everyone. They're usually a little bit smaller, more niche, more focused. Whether it's Numo or that you mentioned just a moment ago, or other types of technologies, what are, just in general, what are some of those sort of micro focused areas that these technologies are trying to solve? Because when I think of like APE, I think of AR, but these are, I think, a little bit different sorts of technologies. Maybe could you give us some examples of what types of technologies there are?
Yeah, well, my gosh, they're countless. They fit into everything. They're things that we don't even realize are taking place. One that's, I'll give an example of one that's kind of, evolved fairly recently as a result of, kind of let's call it the Great Resignation. Companies are struggling with retaining and attracting talent. So anything that an organization can do to differentiate themselves from their competition, they're going to do it. So, you think about, why do we all go to work? We all go to work to get paid. And, the problem with pay is, okay, say for instance, like you're paid every 2 weeks, like you've earned that money, but you're not going to get it paid for 2 weeks. So people have, you fall in hard times. You're at the grocery store and you realize you don't have enough money in your checking account to pay for your groceries. You have more groceries than what you have in your account, but that you've earned the money from your employer. So, this is earned wage access is something that's new to help solve for that. And basically what it is, it gives employees the ability to go online or look at an app on their phone and say, I've worked 5 days, I've earned $1,000, but I'm not going to get paid for another week. It's almost like I don't want to call it in advance, but because it's your money, you can get paid that money right now on the spot. That's been a huge evolution here, fairly recently, and a lot of work has been done in that space. There's countless other examples, but it's that one I would say is probably one that's gaining a lot of traction right now.
Yeah. So a lot of this stuff is going beyond just your typical accounts payable processing, accounts receivable. I mean, you're getting into sort of solving, I guess, not just business problems, but also consumer problems too. Is the scope of fintech? Is it consumer based and business based? Is it kind of covering both sides?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about, just think about, like transferring money from, if we go out to dinner and I want to you pick up the bill and I want to pay you my half for it. I mean, there's apps that will allow you to split those bills. Just if I want to send you money directly, I can leverage the Zelle network as a consumer to send you money on that. There's, and as you look at Zelle, it was originally person to person, and now that's expanded for, business to consumer. It's, just a network where banks are actually partnering together to make it easier for people to transfer money.
Very cool. Good. So when you look at the mid-market, which is where I know, from what I understand, PNC focuses on the mid-market, and our company, Third Stage Consulting, focuses on the mid-market as well. So we sort of have that common target audience or target market on the business side. How do these sorts of technologies that you're talking about, how do they help these mid-market companies grow, or how can they help them grow?
Yeah, so, I think the biggest thing is, these are, things like this, solutions like this allow companies to focus on what their core competencies are. You think about, how do you make money as an organization? And, this is almost like, let's look at it as, like outsourcing or leveraging technology instead of people to complete routine, non-core tasks so that your organization can focus more of your resources on the activities that make them money. We talked about the Great Resignation, like trying to differentiate from an employee standpoint. This gives an opportunity to make the work that people do more rewarding. So they're not focused on these non-core, or I shouldn't say non-core, but maybe repetitive and non-exciting, not rewarding tasks. It makes the work more rewarding, where people can focus on those things that are more value added, and more in line with the strategic vision of the organization. I think it also, we talked about, replicating our personal experiences, everything that we can do from our phone, those simple experiences. I'll probably come back to that a couple times, but giving employees the same simple experiences that in their business lives that they're used to in their personal lives, and just what we've come to expect. And I think about, retention. I'll come back to that a lot, because every organization I talk to, every company I talk to, that's the, one of the biggest things they're trying to solve for. But I've seen people, I'm sure you've seen people too, that have made decisions to leave organizations because they felt it was just, the work was too manual, things were too disorganized. It wasn't the experience that they wanted to. So they figured they'd go somewhere else and try something different. So it's a retention thing as well. These examples, I mean, it underscores kind of what we've been focused on as an organization. And I'll talk for a little bit about PNC. One task in specific when it comes to finance is cash forecasting. And, up until fairly recently, cash forecasting has been a very manual, labor-intensive, time-consuming process. What we've done here is just leveraging artificial intelligence, machine learning, company historical data. We've developed a way that you can actually streamline that whole process. We call it Pinnacle Cash Forecasting, but the goal of the whole project was to give treasurers and organizations more time to actually use the the cash forecasting versus just spending time building it. So,
Right.
that's really, it's making people more effective and efficient in their jobs.
And they can spend more time thinking and analyzing versus trying to figure out what the forecast is and manually collecting all that data or manually pulling it all together.
Yeah, yeah. Spreadsheets. Listen, Excel is great, but it takes a lot of work to do that stuff. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, we want those folks focused on strategy.
Yeah. Especially if you're a CFO or a controller or, kind of a high level finance or accounting person, that's what you should be doing. Yeah. Now, what about when an organization is going through any sort of financial transformation, whether it be technology changes or process changes, organizational changes, or all of the above? What are some of the biggest risks that you see and that your customers are seeing?
Um, I think there's a couple things. I think the biggest one that I see frequently is the misperception that adding technology will fix a broken process. Um, just simply adding technology into a broken process will, sometimes it can, but the majority of the time, it's not going to fix a broken process. Really, what needs to be done is, organizations need to address the inefficiencies in the process, like find out where the problems actually exist. That's going to give you a much better picture of where those problems are, and then you can look to supplement or fix those problems, like fix the problems first and then supplement with technology. Because what you could end up doing is just adding technology to a broken process, which just compounds the problem.
Hmm.
Um, Another thing that I've seen, and I don't know, this is fairly recently, but trying to incorporate too many different technologies or too many vendors into a process. For instance, like let's just say that you've got 6 different technologies to help solve a problem. If something breaks within that process, like you think about your employees, your staff, they're not really going to know who to call. And you end up in a situation where there could potentially be a lot of finger pointing. Nobody wants to say that it's my problem. They're going to say that it's somewhere else in the process. And if you're just trying to fix the thing and you don't know who to call, can get extremely frustrating for people. Another challenge by having too many different technology is you start running into integration issues. One thing may not talk to another just exactly how you want it to. That kind of ties back to the same thing with 6 different technologies, and I'm just using that as a random example, but you run into those integration issues when things don't talk to each other, and the end result is the opposite of that simple experience that we're really going for.
Right.
The other is, just making sure that you vet out what you're really looking for and what you're trying to solve for. And, let's call it the strength and stability of who you're working with. There is a lot of consolidation in the space, in the fintech space specifically, because there's new organizations popping up every day. And somebody may come up with the best solution for the single problem that you have, and you may end up going down a path and you might buy that technology to fix that problem. Only find out 6 months, a year, 18 months down the road, that organization gets acquired because they did such a great job. But the acquiring company decides that, you know what, this isn't going to be one of our core areas, and they just they stop supporting that particular piece. So then you're left looking for another one. So I would say making sure that you vet out, who you're going with. It's really important. And I will say, like, these are the issues, like these things that we've seen. That's exactly why we've been investing significantly in our capabilities at PNC, just trying to build a platform that's nimble, that's secure, that's seamless for our clients. The incubator is, that's a big part of why we developed that incubator, so that so companies don't have to try to figure out, like, who should we work with. Let the banks do the vetting. We're heavily regulated, so let us vet these companies out, and then kind of help yourself out a little bit. So,
Yeah.
and listen, like these things that I'm sharing with you right now, that's not always the case. Like there's some there's some great organizations. I mean, it's just amazing what's being developed. So it's a very, you know, for in the payment space, it's very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. And you actually hit on a couple really good points that are relevant to even outside the world of finance. If you just look at technology and organizational transformations, business transformations in general, they struggle with a lot of these same trade-offs as far as like, do I go implement a really big, broad technology that kind of ties together the entire organization, even outside of finance? But those systems can't be everything to everyone, and so a lot of times what they struggle with is, do I get a big common ERP enterprise-wide system, or do I go find these niche solutions that fill in certain and solve certain problems? And that's sort of what you're talking about here. Is it's these really niche solutions that have found a problem that the big software solutions can't seem to solve or can't solve well. But it shifts the risk now. Now you've solved that problem. Now you've created this other problem, which is the two things you mentioned, which is now we've got to figure out how to integrate the systems, and or we might have a problem with the sort of the overall viability of that vendor. Is that vendor going to be around? It's a startup. It's only been in business for 2 years or whatever. Or is someone going to acquire them, and we don't like the direction that goes? So I think there's a lot of merit to that. And actually, if you don't mind, I want to ask there's an audience question here that's directly related to what you and I were just saying. And this is and thank you everyone who's joining live today, and thanks for chiming in on where you're from. It looks like we've got people from all over the world here: Toronto, U.S., Latin America, I see so far, et cetera. But the question I want to get to is from Leonard on LinkedIn. He has the question of, is there a NetSuite-like fintech company out there? And so NetSuite is a pretty broad, a lot of companies use it for their financials and accounting and that sort of thing, but they also use it for inventory management and other things outside of finance. So is there a fintech company out there that's kind of like the NetSuite of that space, or in terms of the common, wide adoption, or I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I will say, if you're looking for like I think I'm going to interpret this question as I think it's coming through. Is there an ERP provider that's, maybe smaller and more nimble? And honestly, I mean, I would say that's kind of how NetSuite started out. And NetSuite's a great example of one of those companies that has really, made a lot of, they've done a great job. And so what I will say is, from a banking perspective, from an integration standpoint, and there's a lot of organizations out there like this, but integrating with NetSuite, that integration piece has become critical. And so that's really what we're focused on. I would say that, recently we just rolled out, it's called Pinnacle Connect, and what it does, and maybe this can kind of, we'll kind of go down a different path here. Hopefully this answers the question, maybe gives a little more about it. But, banks have really been looking for ways to integrate with, integration has always been key. So how do we integrate with these various ERPs? And NetSuite's a great example. We've been working for a while now on that particular problem, or to solve for that, because organizations don't want to necessarily go into a banking portal. People don't want to go into multiple different systems. They want to stay within their primary system or their primary ERP and transact business there. So we actually came up with a direct connect. It's called Pinnacle Connect, that actually integrates with NetSuite. So instead of having to log into NetSuite and then log into, say, the Pinnacle, which is our online banking platform, all of your work, all of your reporting can be done right within NetSuite. So you set up that adapter. There's other examples like that, but that's been a big focus over the years to try and do that work in a single system, in your main system of record or your main ERP. So, but as far as Leonard's question on, is there a fintech like NetSuite? Yeah, there's hundreds, maybe thousands of them out there that are starting up and finding how they're going to solve for those business needs.
Yeah, seems like it's a very fragmented space, with a lot of A lot of newcomers cropping up all over the place.
Yeah, we learn about a new ERP, and I'm sure you do too. Like we learn about a new one probably every week.
Hmm.
Haven't heard of that one before. Do your research and figure out how we can integrate with it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, sort of along those same lines, while we're talking about the technology specific stuff, and then we'll get back to some of these other questions that I have for you. There's a question here from Abdul on YouTube, who's watching on YouTube, and he says, or he asks, can the business transformation happen using a fully open source technology stack? And maybe I'll shift the question a little bit, or redirect the question a little bit. Is there in the fintech space, is open source a thing, or is it more kind of the proprietary lockdown sort of technology that's harder to customize, if you will?
Um, so that is a great question. I will probably, as much as I would love to answer that question, I don't know that I would be the best person to answer that question.
Sure. I haven't, me personally, I have not heard of an open source fintech solution. I know there's open source ERP systems like Odoo and ERP Next are two examples, and they do financials. They have financial modules. But if you start talking about some of the stuff you're talking about, like with the cash forecasting and pay advances and things like that, um, I don't know of any open source systems in the fintech space. But that's a blind spot of mine. I don't know. It just maybe that I don't know that they're out there. So good question though. Yep. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. I don't have a good answer either.
Yeah.
Um, so when an organization is going down the path of a financial transformation, and presumably CFO is sort of the executive sponsor or the person within the organization driving it from a senior executive perspective, how can CFOs ensure that they're on the right track with their transformations? What are some of the tips or advice you'd have for them?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start with culture. I think you need to make sure that you've got the right, the folks with the right mindset. You need a culture of change and growth, and a team that's going to support that change. Um, you know, I mean, it's in the word. It's change. Transformation is change, and we all know that change is not easy. And you need to have those people with the ability that can look forward on what things could be versus looking backwards on the way that things used to be.
Hmm.
And it takes a special a special group to be able to do that. That's where it starts. I would say the other thing would be to get multiple opinions and get those opinions from trusted advisors. And I will say that there's the RFP process. I'm going to speak specifically to this, and I feel like when you're going down a track of you want innovation, you want transformation. Sometimes I've seen where the RFP process will slow things down, and I know it's a very common practice to issue an RFP. We've got a problem, we want to solve for this problem. Let's issue an RFP. The challenge with issuing an RFP is that you're asking organizations to only respond to the questions and the problems that you have uncovered versus allowing for dialogue and creativity. And I will say an alternative, and I've seen this fairly recently from a couple of companies, is like what I'll call a modified RFP. And it's kind of more of a whiteboarding brainstorming session, and the company brings their trusted advisors in, and they share with what do they want things to look like, where do they want to be, here's where we think our problems are. But you ask those providers, like, hey, what are the problems that we're missing, and how would you solve for them? And I've seen this become very effective because it allows for that brainstorming, that two-way dialogue. So it might take a little more work, but I think on behalf of the organizations it's issuing it, but I think your end result is you're going to get something that's a little more collaborative, that everybody's got a part in, and I think you get a little more creative and innovative with it, and you get a really good picture of what's out there. And I guess maybe I kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but sometimes to consider before even doing that, I'd recommend having an outside party document the process and gaps. and what I love about this is because, you think about it, like you might feel like there's a problem somewhere within your process or within your organization. You feel like it's there, but you can't quite put your finger on where that breakdown is. Bring someone in, bring in an outside perspective, have an outside party identify, like, here's what the process is today. Here's the bottlenecks, here's the breakdowns in the process, and have them document that for you to help get that outside perspective. You can work with consultants. There's plenty of consulting organizations that will do that. There's also, you can look to, there's banks and financial technology companies that will provide this service as well. It's a great, here at PNC we'll offer what's called a diagnostic for our customers, where, we've had plenty of people, CFOs, wherever it may be, that they feel like there's something in their process that's not quite right. And doing that work ahead of time to identify where to focus your efforts, just helps keep it, dialed into what you really want to solve for, and what you really want your outcome to be.
Right.
I'm sure you can appreciate that, Eric.
I can, yeah. And in fact, I was going to clarify one point. You said there's a lot of consulting firms out there that can help with this, but what you didn't say is none are as good as Third Stage Consulting and doing exactly what you just said.
Which is what I meant. It's what I meant. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. I knew what you meant. I just want to clarify for the audience what you were really saying. So along those lines, though, what kind of a role? So before I ask the question, let me back up. When I went to that event that you guys hosted at PNC a couple months ago now, there was, I guess I didn't realize that a banking relationship can be more than just, I'm going to sit my money in the bank. You're going to do the payroll for me. I'm going to access a line of credit. You're going to help me with financing and stuff like that. That's how I've always thought of banks. But at this conference that I went to with you guys at PNC, I realized, well, there's a lot more to this banking relationship, or there can be a lot more to the banking relationship in terms of really helping more strategically, helping finance organizations go through their transformations. So how does a bank like PNC or PNC in particular, how do you guys help organizations and CFOs and executive teams through their financial transformations? What are some examples of ways you would help?
Well, you know what, and that's so you are that misperception of, it's a transactional relationship. That's exactly why we've been focused on this, is to make it less transactional and and more transformational. So thank you for acknowledging that. I'm glad the session paid off.
Right.
If we just kind of maybe zoom out for a second, you think about banks, and we talked about that outside perspective, and banks, especially like the Treasury management department. So the team that I lead here, we sit in a very unique position. We have the ability to see how many different companies operate across a wide range of industries, across a wide range of team sizes and revenue sizes. So we get a lot of different perspectives, not just what works well in one organization, or on the flip side, what doesn't work well. So we just kind of get that unique perspective. You think about, the average lifespan in an organization. People stick with an organization for 5, 10, 40 years. I know that's I guess that's less common now, that somebody will be with the same organization for their entire career. But, let's say throughout, you get to see maybe 3 different organizations, 5 different organizations. We get to see that many in a week, sometimes, a day. So we do bring that outside perspective on what works well, what we've seen work well, and what we've seen people struggle with. I would say that overall, your bank is, or should be, very well plugged into emerging trends. And they can share what leading companies are focused on. These are the problems that you may not be thinking about, that you should be thinking about. Instead of asking the question, hey, what keeps you up at night? We can tell you, hey, if it's not keeping you up at night, this is something that that probably should be keeping you up at night. Not to create additional problems, but those things that you're not thinking about that you should be thinking about. And
like the blind spots.
Yeah. So, it's those changes and just what those leading organizations are doing. And this is one of those things I always preface with. I mean, these the organizations that are the leaders, they're the leaders for a reason. They're the leaders because they're willing to do the things that aren't easy. And because if it was easy, everyone would do it. So
Yeah, yeah, very true. Yeah, yeah, and I think those are good points as far as ways to help. And it's just fascinating that there's a lot more to it, or there can be a lot more to the banking relationship, and really kind of viewing finance and accounting as more of a strategic function within these organizations versus a necessary evil back office sort of function. That so it's just a mindset shift in a lot of ways, it seems.
well, it is, and you think about your treasury team, a lot of treasury teams. I was just at a national conference, the Association for Financial Professionals national conference in Washington D.C. a few weeks ago, and it consists of a lot of providers, such as banks, financial technology, just your normal vendors. But there was also a strong representation from treasurers within various organizations, and those are the conferences where we talk about emerging trends. Like this is what's going on. So the treasury, the treasury department becomes the strategic thought leader for the organization, because they are plugged into that kind of stuff. And these are the technologies that are out there. These are the things that we should be thinking about. This is what our customers are focused on. And really a lot of this stuff is driven by what do our customers need? What are their demands? What do they want from their trading partners? So Treasury is definitely, in my 19 years in banking, I've seen Treasury become a lot more strategic than what I think it once was.
Right. Yeah. Quite a bit different than it was recently. So you were starting to segue into my next question, which we could probably easily spend the whole hour just on this one question, but maybe we can sort of skim the surface or cherry pick some thoughts here. But what are some other general trends that we haven't talked about in the corporate banking and finance space? In particular, I think of stuff like crypto and artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies that are really changing the way finance and banking work. What are some of the other trends you're seeing?
Yeah, oh my gosh, yes, we could have a whole session on that one, but I'll talk about some of the big ones. I did touch on one of them a little bit earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning again. It's the integration, ease of integration between systems and technology. We talked about simple. Everybody, personal, business, everybody wants simple, and what we're trying to solve for right now. I mean, I guess this kind of this was driven from just the change in the way technology is, let's call it, I don't know, consumed is the right word, but you think about an ERP, the move from on-premise, from a banking standpoint, everything was done by file transmissions. The bank would say like, hey, you want to send a payment file, here's the format that you need to send us. And the company would be, okay, we'll need you get your IT team involved, you get your programmers, developers involved, and you create the file in the format that the bank wants so that you can send them a payment file. And that's great when you've got that on-premise and you own that technology. So you send out your batch file. Well, the emergence of these cloud-based solutions and APIs, it's no longer like, hey, here's from the bank, here's the file format that we want. We want a more seamless integration. We don't want to send you a file. We want to transact. We talked about like NetSuite and that Pinnacle Connect adapter. We want to transact business in our system. We want to send, we don't want to send you a batch payment file. We're going to, as AP approves payments, we just want those payments to go out in whatever method. We don't want to wait till the end of the day to send you a single file. So that's where a lot of the focus has really been on that integration. And there's organizations popping up that are, third parties that are out there that are helping to facilitate that integration, so that it's easy for the end user. And again, it's worth saying again, but that's where, that Pinnacle Connect, our focus on that has been huge. And there's other examples of that as well.
Interesting.
I would say the other thing that, that we're seeing there's a lot of discussion around is, data and data-driven decisions and how to effectively use data. We hear a lot about big data, and so, we, even on the banking side as well, we're trying to figure out how do we use data to provide more value, to make better decisions. Every company I work with, they're trying to figure out how do we leverage the data that we have to make it more effective. And I, if I had the answer, I would probably be on an island right now, but I don't have the answer for that. But there's a lot of discussion around data and the effective use of it.
Right.
We talked about, how are we leveraging artificial intelligence to help take the people out of the equation. The cash forecasting module that I talked about earlier, like that's, that's let's call that the tip of the iceberg. Like there's so much more that, there's so much more work that can be done in that space. And, just, payments overall from a payment standpoint. I mean, really what's driving the evolution in some of these areas and these new things coming to market, it's the customer experience. And this is where people are focused. We talked about Zelle earlier, like that simple way to transfer money from person to person. We want that same experience in our business lives as well. I'm going to hit on, it's specific to payments, but real-time payments, RTP. You think about your traditional payment methods. You used to have check, you had ACH, you had wire, you've got card payments. We haven't had a new payment rail in years. Real-time payments is the first new payment rail in years, and PNC was one of the first to adopt into this new payment network. But if you think about, these are when it's real-time payments, we're talking real-time payments. It's immediate payments. It's payments that can be made 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Guaranteed funds. There's limitations, of course, because it's newer. But for instance, I'm pretty sure it's $100,000 limit is what you can send right now. But next year it's going up to $1 million limit. And there's a lot of banks that are already on the network, and more are being added every single month. And I've just this week alone, I was on in a meeting where a large organization, one of our corporate clients, is trying to figure out how do we leverage this, thinking forward, it's not fully built out yet. There's a lot of things that are in, I want to say proof of concept, but pilot, and looking at the use cases, like how do we implement this new payment rail to give us a leg up and to make our customer experience better than the experience they get with our competitors. So yeah, it is, if there's anyone that, is passionate about payments like I am, that one is very exciting. And there's going to be, it's going to make a lot of, it's going to disrupt a lot of things from the traditional ways that payments are made. Our existing payment rails will still sit there, but
Right.
that one's pretty cool.
Just giving people more options and more convenient ways to
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of it from the payment side, it's, dollars and data. It's, there's moving money has actually become fairly easy. It's, moving money with the data that you need to go with that payment. That's the part that's kind of been the hang up over, as we move to this electronification of payments. So dollars and data, and RTP gives you the ability, real-time payments gives you the ability to move dollars. And not that those other payment rails can't, it's just, it wasn't what they were initially created for. It was, they were just a movement of money platform.
Right. Right. Now, when you talk about data, what about is data? When you think of data, are you also seeing changes or emerging technologies or trends on more kind of the financial reporting and consolidation side of things as well? Or are you thinking more at the transactional level, or is it both?
It is really both. It is really both. I mean, we talked about from a cash forecasting standpoint, like leveraging that data, historical data to make future decisions and forecast out for the future. But it's also, how do you use your customer data? Think about an organization like, How can you share data between accounts payable, accounts receivable, and what's the benefit of it? I guess that's the piece of it. Like, what is there on one side versus the other, and kind of keeping that communication open. We look at that from a banking standpoint too. Is we handle a lot of payments, outgoing payments for organizations and for clients. We also take a lot of payments in. So where's the how can that data help out? How can it help our customers to be more successful? Is there something that we can provide for them? And I think every company is trying to solve for that. Like, how do we leverage the data that we have and make it effective and efficient and useful?
Right.
Because you got to weed through to find the good stuff, because there's plenty of it out there. It's a matter of finding the impactful piece of it, relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that we haven't touched on yet is crypto. How does crypto fit into this whole, as far as payments and that sort of thing? What are you seeing on that front?
Yeah. So, I guess it's obviously it's a newer technology, newer payment method. We are trying to, as an organization, we're just trying to figure out how it can be, how do we leverage it? The underlying technology, as you talk about blockchain, there's a lot to be explored there. And while there's discussions happening on the bank side, it's, I think we just need to figure out how we as a bank and as an organization, it's, how do we leverage that? And that's kind of where we're at right now. There's a lot of different use cases that are being put forward, and I think a lot of people are just trying to figure out, how do we use it? What's going to be most efficient?
Right. So I know, being that you work for a large bank that's highly regulated, and in some ways you have to be careful what you say. I want to ask you this question: how much of my money should I invest in crypto right now? I'm kidding. No, but it is interesting. It's you're talking. I guess that's the thing about emerging technologies, whether it's AI or crypto or just payments in general. All this stuff. I mean, it's. I think organizations, it seems like they have to sort of figure out where they are on the risk tolerance or whatever, as far as what they are and aren't willing to take on, and how proven does a technology need to be before they feel comfortable taking it on. I'll just give you an example. I asked that crypto question, kidding, obviously, but I'm totally risk adverse. I am not interested in crypto, at least not at this point. But I know a lot of people that are. So I think as an organization too, though, you have to look at where do we fit as a organization? What's our culture and risk tolerance and all that stuff before deciding what technology or technologies make the most sense for us.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh,
sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No. I guess, just, talking about the, whole crypto and blockchain, I guess, as I was thinking more about it, just kind of backing up a little bit, just more specifically with blockchain, and, the healthcare industry is one of the examples that I should probably share here. And as we all know, like, the healthcare industry has experienced significant disruption over the last few years. Aside from, like, actually caring for patients, you think about the back office activities like settling claims, paying providers, they've been drastically affected. So, one of the things that we saw at PNC was an opportunity to innovate and invest in blockchain in this specific example. So, alongside with some of the major healthcare providers, insurance companies, and just, some of our banking peers, to really ensure that the bottlenecks and rejections don't happen, and the whole process is frictionless. So, this investment that we've made has led to a standalone company named Avenir Health. And really, Avenir, it's been designed to create that seamless end-to-end experience and eliminate the inefficiencies afflicting that we see in today's healthcare system. So, That's,
Interesting.
I know it's a very specific example, but it's one of those where blockchain and partnership and collaboration has really paid off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. There's just so many different technologies out there, and even this whole conversation is eye-opening in that there's all these different functions, and within each of these little functions, there's multiple vendors providing offerings within it. And back to your point you made earlier, it can be overwhelming, to choose and navigate, which ones do I want, and once I find the technologies I want, how do I tie it all together, and how do I make it work for my business? So it's a good eye opener from that perspective for sure.
Yeah.
So, well, good. Well, I appreciate everything you've shared here today. How can people learn more about PNC if they're looking for, a new banking relationship, or they just want to learn more about PNC or about you?
Oh
What's the
my
best?
gosh. Yeah,
That
thanks. Yeah, well, if you don't have a relationship with PNC, if you do have a relationship with PNC, definitely talk to your relationship team or, your treasury management officer. I would say that if you don't have a relationship with PNC and you'd like to get more information, I'll direct you to pnc.com. Great place. I mean, we're, large financial services organization. So, if it's specifically on the payment space, treasury management, that's going to be the group that you want to work with. Depending on where you are, if you're not in the western part of the United States, which looking at where a lot of folks have joined us from today, I can find out, we can certainly find the right people for you. So, yeah, excited to have a discussion. And this is, for some people, this is exciting stuff. I'm one of those people. Eric, you're obviously one of those people as well. So,
right? You and
yeah.
I might be a little biased, but yes, and hopefully, there are people watching the show and listening in too that I'm sure find it interesting as well. So I want to thank you for being on the show. This was a great discussion. I learned a lot from you and a lot of stuff I didn't know about fintech and finance stuff in general. So thanks very much for being on the show, Dan.
Hey, it was an honor and a pleasure. I'm glad that, happy to be here with you and your audience today. So,
Absolutely. And speaking of the audience, thanks for listening in today. For those of you on the live stream, really appreciate that. This interview is actually going to be part of our Transformation Ground Control podcast. So this recording will get repurposed and polished and edited and all that stuff and incorporated into an upcoming episode of Transformation Ground Control, which is a podcast that comes out every Wednesday on YouTube, LinkedIn, as well as on the usual audio podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, all that good stuff. It'll probably be, I believe this interview will be the first episode of the new year. Right now we're releasing our best of series, best of 2021 series through the rest of December. And then our first sort of new episode will be in January. So keep an eye out. First week of January, this interview will show up in that episode. So thanks again to the audience for being here today. Thanks again, Dan. And hope you all have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend. And hope to see you soon on these live streams. And we'll see you all soon. Take care and thank you.
thanks, Eric.
You bet. Thanks, everyone.